Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a first look at what desktop GIS actually looks like as users. We'll dive into ArcGIS Pro, take a look at how the interface is organized, how it presents tools to us, and a bit of a look at using some data within the interface. So before we dive in, I want you to take a quick moment and just imagine what you think desktop GIS should look like. How is it going to present tools to us? Where would you go to change options? How might you use this software? I want you to think about what you would expect so that you can imagine all the different places you might need to look around. GIS software is very complex, and having curiosity and the ability to think about where these pieces are lets you both discover new functionality and use the functionality you know a little better. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, down here at the bottom of my screen, we have the Windows 10 taskbar. Yours probably doesn't have as many icons as this. And if you're running on a Mac, it won't look like this at all. But I want to point out really quickly 3 different GIS applications that you'll get some exposure to. 2 of them in this course and 1 maybe elsewhere. So here we have the icon for ArcGIS Pro, which is what I'll be doing most of the demonstrations in this course with. And then we have ArcMap, and ArcMap is the previous version of ArcGIS that is now being replaced by ArcGIS Pro. And prior versions of this course were done in ArcMap, and we still have the videos around in the resources section that map to the videos we're going to show you in this version of the course. So if you need to know ArcMap, you can still take a look at those. And then we'll also be doing some videos in QGIS, specifically because ArcGIS Pro is Windows only. So for those of you who run on a Mac or run on Linux or some other operating system, you can run QGIS if you'd like, and we'll make sure to give you a video whenever we introduce a major user interface element of how to do that same thing in QGIS. But when we talk common GIS concepts, we'll still be doing most of the demonstrations in ArcGIS Pro. So you'll get used to these 3 icons, and note that I keep them all docked because I use all 3 of these applications regularly. GIS isn't about knowing one specific piece of software. It's about knowing the concepts and knowing where in the suite of tools available to you, you can accomplish your goals. So with that said, let's start up ArcGIS Pro. I know I have the icon down here, but just to better replicate what you're going to experience your first time, let's go to the Start menu and type ArcGIS Pro. And you can search for it. In Mac, you can use your Spotlight search, or you can find it in the list of programs. And click on what comes up. And it's going to initialize. And ArcGIS Pro takes just a moment to launch, not too terribly long. This computer's aging at this point, but still runs ArcGIS Pro pretty well and starts up pretty quickly. And what I want to point out as we get started here is this concept of a project that is immediately apparent the moment we open up ArcGIS Pro. And the other thing we see on the screen is my sign-in information here. So to start out, we'll take a look at this sign-in information because you may already be getting a sign-in prompt if you're trying to follow along to this video. And if you're getting that, we're going to show you how to license and sign into ArcGIS in a separate video. So just sit tight, watch this video, maybe return to it after you get the software set up and licensed. But everyone has to be signed in, or you need to get a license some other way. But if you're going to get a license through this course, you'll need to be signed into an account, and that is accessed up here. From there, we have these projects. Now, if you've used other GIS software, the concept of a project's a little different, and we can see my recent ones, but let's just start a blank one and see what it looks like here. So if I click blank, it says create a new project. It asks me for a name, and so I'll call it First Look Desktop GIS for what we're calling this video. And note that I didn't put any spaces in the name, and that's becoming a little bit old school at this point, but I'd still highly recommend it. Most of the tools in GIS can handle spaces, but some of them are still from a much older era of computers where spaces create problems, and it's just much safer. It's going to be easier on you if you just don't use spaces when naming things. So where possible, try to keep things as all one word or separate with underscores, which are often a little safer even than hyphens or dashes. And then it asks me where I want to save this. So I'm going to quickly save it in another folder on my computer. Put it in here and in here. You don't have to put it in the same folder as me. Don't worry about following along exactly. Just if you are following along, save it somewhere useful for you that you can find it. I'm actually going to do new folder here, call it that, and we'll put it in that folder. Now, when I click OK here, it's going to create the project, and the project isn't simply a single file. And I'll be able to show you in just a moment what that means, but what the project gives us is immediate access to a geodatabase that it creates for us, and it automatically creates a toolbox for us, and we'll learn what both those are later. But it's a great container because inside our project folder, which I can show you, we have a nice place to put all of our data for the project and store many different maps, many different data sets so that it's all consolidated in one spot. So if I bring in the project folder here, we see that I'm in the folder I created and we have a geodatabase, the actual project file, and the toolbox. And we can save and store other data in this folder. It's fine. These things just need to stay in their locations relative to each other. But when we're in GIS, a lot of things will just work because all three of those are created together. So these will come in handy a little later. Beyond that, I want to take a moment and look around at the different panes here. So this is the contents pane. This is the catalog pane, P-A-N-E. And then we also have tabs or ribbons, as you might have used in something like Microsoft Office before. And I accidentally undocked it by picking it up there. And so we can take these panes and we can drag them around and we can leave them floating, or we can move which side of the window they are on here. And so we can see these little icons pop up showing us exactly where I'm going to dock it. So I could dock it top or right here. And when I do that, it becomes something that can pop out or in, and it looks like I didn't successfully dock that there. But I can also put it side by side with another pane. So I have these two on the right side now, and I can click the pin so that it auto hides. So if I click contents, it comes out, and I click somewhere else, it should go back in. And then if I click it again, it stays flown out, so to speak. It stays open all the time, no matter what I do. And then I can also dock it to the bottom of another one. So I can split here if I wanted to do that. For this course, and in general, I tend to keep contents on the left and almost all of my other toolbars on the right. And that's because contents is what I'm going to want to access most of the time. And then the others, I only usually need to access one of them at a time. So keeping this available all the time and my other tools over here flying out as needed is my preferred workflow. Up at the top, we have a set of tabs here, and usually you'll be seeing home, but let's start by going to insert. And so far, we haven't actually seen any geographic anything, information or otherwise. So under insert, we can add a new map to our project. Projects can have many maps, and they can have many print layouts for those maps, but we got to add a map to our project, and it gives us a map, appropriately named map. And what's great is we still have the catalog pane open here, and I can expand it and see that I have a map named map. And over here in the contents pane, I can change the name of my map just by slowly double clicking on it there or hitting F2. And let's call it my demo map just for now. And I see that it changes up here and over here just to illustrate that this is one item that I just created. Now, by default, ArcGIS Pro adds what's called a base map for us. You're probably familiar with these from things like Google Earth or Google Maps or your preferred online mapping setup or your phone or something like that. And we can click and drag automatically, no special tool necessary. And we can use the mouse scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And it automatically gives us some context information. Just by default, we don't have to do anything to get that. And that's pretty nice to contextualize our information. In prior GIS software, a lot of people got lost immediately because this would have just been a blank white box in here. And what do you put and how do you know where that is in the world? So it's kind of nice to be able to see immediately where your data lives to know, is this data correct in the first place? And just to note that this is a layer like any other information we are going to be adding, which I will do in a moment. I can uncheck it and I can turn it off and I can turn it back on. So it draws it only when we want it to, based upon how we select it to be drawn in the table of contents over here. And clicking just as it says when I hover on it, it toggles visibility. Now, so far I've been using the Explore tool, and if I hover over it, it gives me some context-sensitive help information, which is nice, and I could press F1 for more help as it notes. But I can change to other tools here. So if I want to, I can go to full extent, which zooms me to the whole world in this case. But if I didn't like going there, I can go to previous extent here, which will take me back or forward as to how I've zoomed around. And I can also just do fixed zoom in with this and fixed zoom out, which kind of just slowly refine how I'm looking at my map. Now, one last thing I want to point out under the Explore tool though is, as it says in the help here, if I hold shift, I get a zoom rectangle. I think a lot of people, if you've used other software for image editing or illustration or something like that, you might want to be able to zoom in on a specific area. Using your mouse can be unwieldy. Sometimes you're not zooming in exactly where you think you are. So if I hold shift, I get the zoom tool here and I can select a specific box somewhere to zoom in on. Maybe I want to see Quincy here. So that gives me a little greater control. And again, I was just holding the shift key down while using the Explore tool to get that. Now, the last major thing I want to point out about the interface is that everything in ArcGIS Pro is context sensitive. So depending on what I have selected in my table of contents here, I may get new tabs showing up. So look up here when I select this layer, and I get a new tab for appearance settings for this layer. So I can change things like transparency here or something like that. That'll become more powerful as we add our own data. And then I may also have the panes that show up on the right hand side. They may change which layer they are acting on. So to demonstrate that better, let's actually add some of our own data to the map. So I'll scroll down here to my computer, into the folder that has my data, and we'll just add some simple counties data for California. And if I click on it and click OK, or if I double click on it, it's going to think about it, and then it adds that data to my map here. And it zooms out to the full extent so that I can see it. And I can see the outline and I can see the color of it. But let's change the color of it because I think it's a little hard to see on my screen. I don't know how you all can see it, but notice that a few tabs were added here for labeling and data. So I got more information available to me as to what I can change based upon just having this layer selected here than when I select the base map. But if I right-click on this layer and go to symbology, which is the term for how we display our data, I get this other pane here. Now, let's pin this. Not auto-hide it. Let's pin it so that it stays open. And note that it changes when I select layers as well. Again, this is context sensitive. It's sensitive to which item is selected in the table of contents over here. Now, all I want to do right now is change the color. So we'll go into way more details about working with symbology in future lectures and future classes. But for now, let's click this box next to symbol that shows our template. And we'll just click this thick black outline here. And immediately the symbology of our California counties changes, and we can again see our base map underneath it with the outline of each county. One important thing I should note right now is that none of this is saved right now. So I created the project and that's saved as an empty project, but this map and this data in this map are not saved until I click this button up here, or I go to project and I click save. And at that point, it writes all those changes to my hard disk, and I can then reopen this project in the future and find that map in my catalog here under maps. And immediately it gives me some information, some metadata about my map. I have not added any text for it yet, but it gives me a nice little screenshot here to show me what's in that map. In case demo map is not specific enough of a description, I can see, oh, it's that map that I had county. Okay, one final thing I want to show you is options. So this area here, commonly called backstage by the developers of software. Since we're no longer seeing the main interface, we're backstage here looking at our options. We can open and save projects, and we can set up a bunch of different things like the online content and portals. We can set up our software licensing and our main options here. And one really important thing, if you haven't done a lot of technical work yet, is options panes are great to just look through. If you want to just get a sense for what functionality software has, or even if something's not bugging you yet, it can be great to look through and figure out what you can change, so that if you run into something where you're like, using this software is inconvenient, you may know that there's just a setting that fixes that for you. Like maybe I don't always want it to create a new folder for me when I create a project because my workflow is to put it into some existing folder. I can uncheck that box. I can set it to have a different base map show up automatically when I add new maps. So maybe I don't want that topographic map, I want it to show me imagery instead. I can do that. I can add it each time if I want. It doesn't have to be in options, but I could do this by default. And some common things that people like to change are under navigation. Some people especially like it, like I do, when you scroll your mouse wheel forward that it zooms in, and when you scroll it back that it zooms out. But other people have very strong opinions that it goes in reverse, and so you can switch it so that your mouse causes it to zoom a different direction. So take the time to just kind of look through these now, and then maybe again when you're finished with the course and you have a better understanding for what all these concepts are. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone and hit back to go back to my map now. And that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, we learned a bit about the 3 core GIS packages I use, the ones that you might be using in this course, and then we learned what ArcGIS Pro looks like, how it uses context-sensitive information, how to create a new map and add data to that map, then change the basic symbology. This lecture was just to get your feet wet. In the next lecture, we're gonna take a look at some GIS terminology you need to know in order to be able to understand the things I'm telling you. We'll learn about some of the words I used in this lecture and some new ones for you. So get ready for that. See you next time.